Welcome back, everybody, to the Retrograde right here on Dead Jester Cinema. For those of you who are new to the channel, what the Retrograde is I go through an old movie and then I assign a letter grade to 4 gradable categories: story, characters, direction, and music. Then I combine all those grades into one cumulative score for the entire film. And on this edition of the Retrograde, we're going to go all the way to 1989 for the third installment of the Indiana Jones franchise, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, where Indiana Jones must once again do battle with Nazis for this, the Holy Grail. Now, I have a very personal affection to this movie. I'm not going to mince words right off the bat. It is my favorite Indiana Jones movie out of the entire franchise. So, yeah, just strap in. It's probably going to be a giant stroke fest throughout this entire thing. But we're going to choose wisely, and we're going to dive in right now to Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. So our film opens up in Utah in 1912, where a Boy Scout troop is out doing their Boy Scouting stuff when 2 scouts wander off and discover grave robbers looting a dig site. And one of those scouts just happens to be a very young Indiana Jones, who is not too happy that the artifact that those looters found, the Cross of Coronado, looks to be on its way to the black market and not to a museum.
That cross is an important artifact. It belongs in a museum.
Indy's whole line of "it belongs in a museum" has really taken on a life of its own, to where it's kind of a social meme. Anyway, Indiana swipes the cross, and on his way out he alerts the looters, who realize he stole their treasure. And so the chase is on, all the way to a circus train where young Indy tries to lose them in and amongst various cars of animals. And while making his way through the reptiles car, Indy falls into a container of live snakes, and, well, we know where that fear comes from now. And I really can't blame him either. Now, I don't have a fear of snakes, but if that happened to me, that shit would probably scar me for life too. So after getting out of that snake-infested hell and having some really close calls involving a rhino and also a lion, Indy is confronted by all the looters, who demand he give them back the cross, to which Indy's like, kiss my ass. So they try to take it by force. But a snake that was hiding up Indy's sleeve scares the shit out of the ginger looter, and Indy dives into a magic caboose. I feel like there's an ass joke that could be made here, but I'm gonna let this one alone. When Proto Jones thinks he has Indy cornered, he discovers that Indy has snuck out through a trap door under the train and is now running back to town. And he seems kinda cool with that. Anyways, Indiana finds his way home, but before he can brag to his father on what he found, Dad chastises him. But Indy sees his scout friend arriving with the sheriff, so he dips out. And when the sheriff inquires about the cross he took, the looters enter, claiming their rights to it since, they found it first. So a reluctant Indy hands it over so it can be sold by this shady-looking guy in white. But before the men leave, Proto Jones literally passes a fedora onto young Indy, and then we time travel to 1938, where Indy has been caught trying to steal the cross back from that shady man in white, who kind of looks a lot like ex-Steelers coach Bill Cowher.
It belongs in a museum! So do you!
So fisticuffs ensue, and Jones eventually takes back possession of the cross and dives off the ship just before it explodes. Kaboom! Once again, just another excellent way to start off your Indiana Jones movie. And if I were to rank the openings as of right now, this one would probably sandwich right in between Raiders and Temple of Doom. So, back at home, Indy hands over the cross to his colleague Marcus for safekeeping at the museum. And on his way out, he's confronted by his neglected professorial duties. So Indy grabs his mail and decides to take the rest of the day off. That's when he's approached by these untouchable-looking motherfuckers who bring him to Walter Donovan, who tells Indy that he's intent on finding the Holy Grail, as he shows Indy because he already has one part of a puzzle, and it's this half of a stone tablet. The second half of that tablet is buried in the tomb of a knight in Venice, Italy, which does reveal the location of the Grail itself. And when asked if he can help him find it, Indy declines and points him to the direction of his dad. And Donovan is like, yeah, we tried that, but your dad has gone missing. So upon hearing this news, Indy rushes to his dad's house, and sure as shit, Daddy Jones is gone. And it also looks like someone took their time to clean up the house before Indy got there too. Indy then remembers his mail from earlier, so he opens it and sees that it's his dad's Grail diary. Sort of a daily journal for all things Holy Grail. Indy, sensing something's afoot, decides to take Donovan up on his offer to not only find the Grail, but also find his father. So he flies all the way to Venice to meet up with his dad's last known contact, the extremely beautiful Dr. Elsa Schneider. Let's see, blonde hair, blue eyes, last name is Schneider, speaks with a Germanic accent. No, not suspicious at all. But, I think Indy, probably like the rest of us, is thinking with his little whip. And what I also love about this little sequence too is that while Indy and Elsa are kind of flirting with one another, Marcus essentially cock blocks Indiana, and Indy just gives him this look like, come on, man. It's a scene that has always made me laugh. Elsa takes Indy and Marcus to the last place she saw his father, this library that was converted from an old church, where they were trying to find the lost tomb of Sir Richard. That tomb that had the second half of that tablet. It's here that Indy recognizes the stained glass window from his dad's diary, and that an entrance to the tomb must be somewhere in the library. And after a bit of searching, Indy discovers it.
X marks the spot.
I do love the gag that after all the cryptic clues that have gotten him this far, and even after, in the beginning of the movie where he says,
"An X never, ever marks the spot."
Well, it turns out X does mark the spot. So Indy and Elsa break down into the floor of the library where they find not only a shit ton of rats, but petroleum-soaked catacombs, at the end of which they do find the tomb of Sir Richard and the other half of that tablet marker. But back on the surface, there are some guys not too thrilled about the Grail being discovered, so they knock out Indy's homie Marcus, crawl into the catacombs, and then set it on fire, hoping to kill Indy and Elsa. But through some ingenuity and grave desecration, Indy and Elsa escape. Okay, time out. I need some help here from you all viewing and in the comments section. Where the hell are they at? Now, obviously, we see him tip over the coffin, and we are to assume that he dives underneath the coffin, so that way the fire surrounding them doesn't get inside. But, how the fuck is there a torch behind them if they're underneath this coffin? I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me. It's always been one of those things in this movie that I just couldn't wrap my head around. Somebody please just help me out with this one. Anyways, once they escape, a boat chase ensues, and Indy gets his hands on this Ben Stiller looking guy who is trying to kill him. The man explains that he and his crew were sworn protectors of the Grail, and they keep it safe no matter the cost. So when Indy tells him that he's not trying to find the Grail, he's trying to find his father, dude is like,
"Oh. Is that all?" Well, why didn't you tell me?
And he informs Indy that his father is being held captive in a castle in Austria. So after the trio return to the hotel, Indy and Marcus discover that the starting line in the race for the Grail is a city called Alexandretta, which Indy tells Marcus to go there and meet up with Sala. After that, Indy and Elsa speed off to Austria to find Indy's dad. But upon arriving at said castle, Indy discovers that the people holding his dad captive are in fact Nazis.
Nazis. I hate these guys.
After a bit of searching, Indy believes he's found the room his dad is locked in, and after a little bit of whip play, Indy breaks in and finds his father.
Junior?
Yes, sir.
It is you, Junior. Don't call me that, please.
But there isn't time for catching up as Nazi guards enter the room to capture father and son. But Indy pulls some Call of Duty shit and breaks his father out. But when they return to Elsa, she too is captured. Indy is warned, however, by his father not to trust her, but Indy doesn't listen and lays down his gun. But when he does, Elsa takes the Grail diary from his satchel and, oh snap, would you look at that heel turn? Who could have predicted that? The red flags were all there for you, Indy. I mean, maybe you should have listened to your father.
But you should have listened to your father.
Yep, what the evil Nazi woman said.
How did you know she was a Nazi? She talks in sleep.
Go Pops! And you know what? This isn't the first James Bond that Allison Doody has crossed paths with. Just a couple of years before this movie was made, she was in the 1985 movie A View to a Kill starring Roger Moore. Just a little Bond nerd trivia there for anybody who cares. Now that father and son have been captured and the Nazis are in possession of the Grail Diary, it's here that Walter Donovan is revealed to be the film's traitorous asshole villain, aligning himself with the Nazis just to get the Holy Grail. But when inspecting the diary, he notices pages are torn out, and it's revealed that Indy gave those pages to Marcus, who is busy trying to meet up with Sala and Alexandretta, but is, also kind of looking lost. But he does eventually meet up with Sala, and he also quickly gets captured, so that ends that. And I love the build-up with Indiana talking up Marcus that he's some sort of expert in the field and can easily disappear and he's going to be so difficult to track. But as we see that outside of his museum, Marcus is kind of a bumbling fool. Anyways, Indy and Pops are tied up and left to be executed. But when attempting to free themselves by burning through the ropes, Jones Sr. accidentally drops the lighter. And in a pathetic attempt to blow out the flame, he ends up igniting the entire dining room. Come on! And while taking shelter in the fireplace, Indy accidentally triggers a secret passage door. But on the other side are, of course, Nazis, who are quickly alerted to their presence, and from like 5 feet away, they miss every single gunshot, allowing Indy and Dad enough time to escape their bindings, get the drop on them, like literally, lock them in the Inferno, and then make their way all the way down to escape the castle via motorcycles, which leads to a pretty cool chase that ends with Indy going medieval on one Nazi goon and then teaching the other how to do tricks. Not to keep stroking it here, but I have always loved this motorcycle chase too, because I love the dichotomy between Indiana Jones and his father, if I'm using that term right. Yeah, as you see, Indiana Jones is all happy, he's so proud of himself, and then you look at Henry and he's unimpressed. I mean, isn't that just the epitome of a child-parent relationship there? Once they stop, Jones Sr. informs his son that in order to get the Grail, he's going to have to face 3 tests, or, death traps, which the answers to are in his Grail diary, which is on its way to Berlin with Elsa. So before heading out to meet up with Sala and Marcus, Indy first travels to Berlin to sneak into these pieces of shit's party in order to steal back the Grail diary from Elsa, who does try to plead her case that she isn't really a Nazi, but Indy is like, whatever bitch, I'm not falling for your shit a second time. Now wanted men in the heart of Germany, Indy and Dad do the littlest they can to blend in and slip out undetected. So they decide to board a Zeppelin. But before it can take off, one of the Nazi pricks from the castle boards and starts snooping around. Indy dips out for a moment, and when he does, the Nazi finds Indy's father. But Indy has snuck his way back, now dressed as a conductor, and he asks for Mr. Nazi's ticket. And when Homeboy turns around, Indy punches the shit out of him and throws him off the blimp as it's about to take off.
Tickets, please.
Oh, I got mine around here somewhere. Just hang on, hold your horses. Well, shit!
No ticket.
I mean, I got it right here. Damn, just please don't punch me. Indy and his father finally get to share a quiet moment and go over the 3 tests one must survive in order to obtain the Grail. But before they can really dive deep into that, Indy notices that the Zeppelin is pulling an about face and heading back to Germany. So rather than wait to get got when they land, Indy and his father jump into an emergency escape plane? Was that actually a thing on Zeppelins back in the day? I gotta look this one up. Hold on. Well, I mean, son of a bitch, it looks like it was. I always thought that it was just there out of plot convenience. Anyways, before Indy and Papa Jones can really feel good about themselves, they get intercepted by German Luftwaffe. And in an attempt to fight them off, Henry accidentally shoots out the tail of their plane, forcing them to land, and commandeer this poor son of a bitch's ride. And they try to outrun the fighter pilots. They dispatch one in hilarious fashion by his own stupidity. Kaboom! And the other gets pwned after Jones and his dad are chased onto a beach, and when it looks like they're sitting ducks, Dad uses his umbrella to scare up a bunch of seagulls into the propeller of the Nazi plane, and Boom! And again, this is another father-son moment in this movie that I absolutely love, because it's the first time at all that I'm aware of in this movie that Indy really looks upon his father with any sort of reverence, and it's just a beautiful moment. So now we fast forward a bit, where Indy finds out that his friend Marcus has been captured by the Nazis, whose caravan, complete with a big-ass tank, is making their way through the desert towards the Grail. And that's when that Ben Stiller looking guy shows back up with some of his pals to try to fight off these evil bastards. But they get wiped out pretty effortlessly.
For the unrighteous, the cup of life holds everlasting damnation.
But that little skirmish was just long enough to distract the Nazis so Indy can sneak off to hijack some transportation, and also for his dad to sneak onto the tank in an attempt to rescue Marcus, which goes about exactly as you thought it would. Good job, Henry. Way to go get yourself captured because you decided to play hero. I mean, who the hell do you think you are, James Bond? Indy attempts to rescue his father and Marcus from the tank, but gets hung out to dry, like literally. And after getting ground into the side of a hill, he almost gets completely pulverized into it, until the driver of the tank takes a ricocheted bullet to his dome piece and his dead body hits the driving mechanism thing, and Indy is miraculously spared. Now back on top of the tank, he starts kicking the shit out of this Nazi prick, where he inadvertently saves Marcus by knocking him off the back of the tank, and when Indy's dad is almost on a one-way trip to getting pulverized as well, Sala comes to the rescue, and that's when Indy gets back to the ass beating, but he soon realizes that time is about to run out, as the tank is about to go over a cliff. Good riddance too, and what a fitting end for that little asshole. And what I really love is how you could still see him holding on as his body just gets smashed. In today's cinema, they would have just CGI'd the charm right out of that scene, but with miniatures, even though you could kind of still tell it's miniatures, there's a weight to it, and there's like an impact that you feel that you just don't get the same way with CGI, in my opinion. After fearing that Henry has just lost his son, Indy appears, having saved himself by grabbing onto these dried looking roots before going over the cliff. And that's when father and son share a warm, emotional, and loving embrace. That is before Henry gets back down to business. As you know, we still have like a grail to find. And again, it's little moments like this in this movie that I absolutely love, because it's such a nice contrast to the action, and it helps punctuate the emotion in these scenes. Plus, I also love how Henry just dumps Indy to the side because he's all giddy to continue the quest, because, you know, we do have a grail to find before the Nazis do. And it's just a nice little role reversal moment. Anyways, Indy and crew have tracked the Nazis down to this Cave of Wonders looking place, where they are trying to make headway in finding the grail by sending these poor bastards in, and look out! Nope, I'm not gonna go there.
Not a good time to lose one's head.
Stop it.
That's not the way to get ahead in life.
No.
Austin, stop it.
It's a shame he wasn't more headstrong.
Damn it, stop it. No more headless jokes. It's just too easy. Once again, the Nazis are alerted to Jones's presence and his whole crew gets captured. And while holding Indy at gunpoint, Donovan pressures him to go get the grail. But when Indy is reluctant to do so, Donovan ups the ante and shoots Indy's dad right in the stomach.
Dad.
My God. You just killed James Bond.
Well, not quite, Tiffany. Henry isn't dead, but is mortally wounded. And the only way he can be saved is if Indy does what Donovan tells him to do, and that's retrieve the grail. But before he can do so, he must survive those 3 tests as mentioned before. Tests, or, you know, death traps, whatever you want to call them. Starting with Test 1, the Breath of God, in which only the penitent man shall pass, which Indy at the last minute realizes means to kneel, and he survives, nearly getting his head chopped off. So, 1 down, 2 to go. Test number 2, the Word of God. Only in the footsteps of God will he proceed, which Indy deduces must mean spelling out the name of God, which is Jehovah. but he goes all stupid for a moment before remembering that in Latin, Jehovah begins with an I. So now that he has that figured out, Indy scrabbles his way across to the other side, which leads us to the final test, test number 3, the path of God. Only in the leap from a lion's head will he prove his worth.
Impossible. Nobody can jump this.
Get the hell out of here. What's he supposed to do? Just Super Mario jump his ass across that chasm? Anyway, Indy takes the chance with a leap of faith, and when he steps out, well, son of a bitch, what do you know? Both Indy and myself are shocked that he hasn't fallen to his death, and that's when it's revealed that what he has stepped on is a forced perspective painted bridge. So once across, he enters a small cave where a very, very, very old knight is just chilling. Alerted to Indy's presence, that knight tries to attack, but yeah, he kind of forgot he was old. So Indy helps him back upright, and that's when he learns that the old man is one of the original knights from the Crusades, and he's been guarding the Holy Grail this entire time. It does kind of make me laugh in a way that Homeboy's just been sitting there and he has constructed all of these death traps, but you know, I guess when you've been sitting in a cave guarding a cup for over 1,000 years, there's not much else to do. It's about that moment when Donovan and Elsa show up, having followed Indy the entire way, and they ask the old man which one of the many antique roadshow looking cups is the Holy Grail. That's when the knight tells them that they have to choose, but
choose wisely, for as the true Grail will bring you life, the false Grail will take it from you.
Homeboy here is stumped, so Elsa hands him this gaudy looking piece of shit, and trusting her judgment, Donovan goes to drink his way to everlasting life. But, you know, God has other plans. God damn! Somebody get him some moisturizer, quick!
He chose poorly.
You could put this scene right here, right up there with the ending of Raiders of the Lost Ark that scared the living shit out of me when I was a kid. I remember showing this to like my nephew when he was a little younger, probably about 10 years old or so, and he just starts busting up laughing at this scene, and I'm sitting there like, was I just a big pussy as a kid? Short answer is yes. Knowing that time in his father's life is running out, Indy now has to choose. And instead of going for cups that would make Liberace weak in the knees, he makes the educated guess and goes for the unassuming cup amidst all the other posers. And when he takes it and drinks from it, the old knight informs Indy,
"You have chosen wisely."
He also tells him that, yeah, you know, there's this big seal on the floor out there, and if you want to live forever, you can't cross it. And that's when Indy rushes back out with some fresh Holy Grail water that reacts like hydrogen peroxide and heals Henry of his mortal gunshot wound. But as Indy helps his dad to his feet, Elsa gets all greedy and decides to snatch up the Grail.
We have got it! Come on!
Elsa, you might want to turn around. You're gonna step on the thing the knight warned you about. You're crossing it. Oh, well, fuck it. That's when the earth starts to open up and is going to swallow the Grail. So Elsa decides she is going to try to grab it. But instead of being like her frozen counterpart, Elsa does not let it go. And Indy loses his grip and she falls to her death. Whee! But the tables quickly turn, and now Indy is in a position to grab the Grail, while being held onto by his father. And Indy nearly falls into the same greed lust that killed Elsa when...
Indiana, let it go.
And with that, Indy turns and helps his dad help him up to safety. And I'm spotlighting this moment here because it is the first time in the entire movie that Henry refers to his son not as Junior, but as Indiana. It's that acknowledgement that Indy had been looking for from his father since he was a young man. That acknowledgement and that connection that his father finally sees him as his own man and not just simply Junior. Admittedly, because of the very personal connections I have with this movie and because of my late stepfather who introduced me to these movies, and this was the one I watched the most when I was younger, it's hard for me not to get emotional watching this scene. But before Indy and his dad and the rest of the guys leave, Henry sees the Grail Knight standing off beyond all the falling, crumbling ruins, and it's there when the knight bids them an epic farewell. And because they don't want to become permanent residents with the knight, Indy and Dad flee as the entire temple collapses around him. Once outside, Indy and his father reunite with Marcus and Sala, and the quartet ride off into the sunset, perfectly capping off the Indiana Jones franchise. Or not. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. How does it grade out? Well, let's just mosey on over to the retrograder and let's grade it. The story gets an A+. It's just terrific and returns to the whole fun and adventure of Raiders of the Lost Ark. But what I love is that just as significant as it is about finding the Grail, it's also a story about father and son finding each other and reuniting again after years of estrangement. The direction gets an A. Still a fantastic looking film, but I feel like it's just a notch below Spielberg's effort on both Raiders and Temple of Doom. Maybe it's just a sign of the times of when this movie was shot, but it has a cleaner look to the film quality. Whereas both Raiders and Temple of Doom had an old school gritty and dirtiness to it. I don't know, maybe that's just me that sees that. But that being said, it is still a fantastically directed film. Plus, the tank chase in the desert is just epic. It is arguably one of the most well-directed sequences in the entire franchise, and dare I say, action movies in general. I mean, I would put this sequence right up there with the caravan chase from Raiders of the Lost Ark. The characters get an A+. Much like Raiders, all the characters are terrific from top to bottom, and it begins and ends with Harrison Ford and Sean Connery, who have amazing chemistry with one another, and their relationship just feels so natural as father and son. Even though they might only be 12 years apart in age, you would never have guessed it, as both are legendary actors at the height of their prowess here, and they play off of each other extremely well. Now, in terms of villainy, I'd put Donovan up there with Belloc, actually. But unlike Belloc, who's sold out for, the archaeological prestige, all Donovan cares about is his personal greed and that he is willing to actually murder somebody to get what he wants. That's some dastardly shit. Elsa is also a very good addition to the Indiana Jones girls or women, however you want to call it. I like the twist of her actually being kind of a villain in this, but yeah, I really like her, and I like Alison Doody in just about everything she's in, so yeah. Plus, did I mention before that, she's hot? And it's also nice to see regulars like Marcus and Sala return, and actually expand on their characters more and give them a little bit more to do. The music gets an A+, and I put this score right along with Raiders as Williams' best in the franchise. Everything from like the musical cue theme that he uses for the Nazis every time they're on screen, to the Grail Knight theme. It's all just another masterpiece. But its brilliance is in the quietness of it. Compared to the scores and cues from Raiders and Temple of Doom, which had kind of loud and bombastic sort of themes, The Last Crusade's main theme is a very tranquil and mellow kind of sounding song, and I think it perfectly underscores the father and son narrative. And obviously, like with the other two movies, this is Indiana Jones and we're dealing with the MacGuffin, which in this case is the Holy Grail, which gets an A+. And much like the Ark, the Holy Grail is a treasure of all treasures. I mean, wars were fought over finding this thing. And I think this movie does a great job in presenting the history of the Grail, and also using it to work within the plot, and also using it as a catalyst between the relationship of Indy and his father. So with all those grades combined, that brings the cumulative score up to a 97.2%, which means that Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade gets the grade of an A+, and is also the second recipient of the Golden Horns Award. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade is another masterclass of filmmaking. Not only does it feature great action, great music, great characters, and great direction, it also features a very compelling and emotional story about a son trying to reconnect to his father, and vice versa. And that the quest to find the Grail was also a quest to find each other. Yeah, I absolutely love this movie. It's my personal favorite in the entire franchise, and it's just very deserving of that Golden Horns Award. Well, that is it. I have graded Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, which means there's only one film left for me to retrograde, unless you count Dial of Destiny, which we'll get to that when we get to that. But anyways, how would you grade Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade? Do you think I've graded it fairly? Do you think it's an underrated entry? I don't think a lot of people really classify it as underrated, but I do know there are a lot of people that feel it's overrated. So please put your grades below if you have them. And as always, like, comment, and subscribe. Adios. Now, GTFO.